Greetings, race community. Brent coming in live with today's guest, BJ Davisson, who serves as Executive Vice President for Development and the Chief Development Officer at the West Virginia University Foundation. Welcome, BJ.
Hey, great to be here, Brent. Thanks for asking me to hop on and chat with you a bit.
Well, we have known each other for, I'm going to call it a decade, if you count a Big 12 development conference run-in probably early on in my entrepreneurial journey. But I feel like our conversations have generally been very centered around the moment or maybe the future. We've not spent too much time talking about your past. And so I'm excited to learn more and share with your audience and with our audience. And one of the questions that I've enjoyed asking our guests is just to learn a little bit more about your own higher education journey. So take me back to junior year of high school. Who is that guy? What was he into and what led him to Frostburg State University?
Oh my goodness, that's a good way of putting it. So like many people in the development profession, I never intended to land here. So yeah, as a high school junior, senior, was really an active leader, and class president. And
where were you? Where were you?
A small town called Westernport, Maryland, with a high school that is now closed and consolidated, like many small town high schools. But Westernport was at one point the westernmost port on the Potomac River, how it got its name. So right across the river from West Virginia, grew up in a small working class town, had three older sisters, two considerably older who did leave town to go to college. And I have a lot of, I owe them a lot, frankly, because I come from a town where not many people actually went to college. So anyhow, went to Frostburg State because that was about a half hour away. It was easy. It was close by, but I had a wonderful experience there, was very active in, again, kind of student government and student senate and resident assistant and all that student life stuff, which led me to Ohio State. Go ahead, sorry.
Can I just ask you a little bit more about, I feel like Western Maryland, I've traveled a lot around this country. We did this crazy RV trip during the pandemic. I think Western Maryland is a great enigma of the United States of America. Nobody knows about Western Maryland. So tell us more about growing up in Western Maryland and just that context, because it sounds very important for the rest of the journey.
Well, thank you. So yeah, for those of you who look at the map, and Western Maryland is that skinny part of the state that kind of hangs over West Virginia to the far west, very mountainous. Prior to some highways being constructed, I guess in the 80s, maybe Route 68, it was very kind of secluded because it wasn't easy to get even to Baltimore or DC from there. And actually, when I went to graduate school, people said to me, "Oh, you're from the East Coast." I'm like, "No, I'm not," because it seems so far away. But it's a beautiful area, lots of recreational opportunities, downhill skiing, whitewater rafting. But like many parts of the country, a place where the new economy is kind of forgotten, been left behind. A lot of former industries have left the region. So it's a beautiful part of the world, and really part of the reason why I landed back at West Virginia University so late in my career, because it's not that far away.
And I want everybody who's listening to just join me in Googling the shape of Maryland, and you're all going to get an education when you start to understand that there even is a Western Maryland and exactly what it looks like. Thank you, BJ.
Sure, anytime.
And so you have it sounds like a really positive college experience, but that you're not on campus, trying to shape an advancement leadership career. What are you thinking about instead?
In college, I thought initially that I wanted to get into banking, and I really don't know why I had that thought, but fortunately, because of my student life experience and getting to know a number of professionals on campus, I ended up pursuing a master's degree in higher ed administration with a concentration on student personnel at Ohio State. So my early higher education career, which really began when I graduated in 1983, was on the student life side of the shop. And that was at Gettysburg College. And that's where I got to meet development people.
Tell me about student life I don't know that we've had a handful of guests that started in the enrollment side, and we've talked a little bit about the similarities and differences between enrollment and advancement. Just tell me about student life. What is student life? How do you know if you had a good week or a bad week, or a good year or a bad year when you work in student life?
Good question. So, student life professionals are entrenched day to day in the lives of students. And at Gettysburg, for example, I handled Greek life and student conduct and student activities. So,
so you've got stories. I didn't know that that's what I was walking into.
Oh, I have cocktail party stories that shouldn't be told this early in the morning, probably. But yeah, so really, every Monday morning I would get the call from police chief who would run down who was misbehaving off campus and that sort of thing, and had responsibilities for lining the seniors up from shortest to tallest for baccalaureate. Student life people, they do whatever, and they handle all the messes, right? But at Gettysburg, being a small institution, really in the middle of battlefields and apple orchards, the younger people that came into the college as professionals either came in through, to your point, admissions, student life, or development. And I got to know the development team because they would come to me looking for ideas that might be worthy of parents' fund participate. Give me some cool concepts, BJ, cool ideas that we could take to our parents to try to raise money around. And I also noticed that the development professionals dressed better, and they always seemed to know the bigger picture of what's going on in the institution more than I did, kind of down in the trenches with student life. And that's really where it got my first taste of fundraising. They asked me to volunteer for the faculty staff campaign. So I did. I asked people for money. I thought it was kind of easy to do.
And so did they rope you in, or kind of what led you to then, what was the next step?
So the next step was a gentleman by the name of Bruce Bigelow, who's well known in our profession, had been the plan giving guy at Gettysburg, was leaving to go to Hood College in Frederick, Maryland, right down the road, to lead their first ever comprehensive campaign. And it was really through his wife over an innocent lunch discussion that I decided to go talk to Bruce about maybe doing development work, because he had openings. And I really, other than that volunteering for the faculty staff campaign, I didn't really know anything about development. And I ended up, long story short, being hired to lead their plan giving program at Hood College in 1989.
And so you show up at work day one.
Yeah.
You're not getting called by the cops every Monday to basically help you craft your portfolio for the week. I mean, how do you start in a plan giving role in that context?
So you think about 1989, technology was really not our friend at that point in time. There were a box of index cards in like a recipe box, which had the names of people associated with Hood College who at one point in time had said that Hood was in their will. That's what I had to work with. And so, we did some really simple things out the gate, like, okay, let's have a recognition society for those people who have put us in their will. Like, let's do some marketing around this. Let's see if we could get more people, to tell us this. And again, this is the day of, we only had direct mail and telephones. We had, I remember when the Apple computer landed on my desk. I mean, we didn't have email. So it was a lot of, but I'm grateful for the fact it was a lot of just slogging through information and calling people up and getting in the car before cell phones, or Waze or anything else, and just going out and meeting people and telling the story. And I loved it. It was great. It was just great.
I've never asked anybody in plan giving this question. Why do people leave Hood College and other colleges in their wills without even being asked to do so?
So I think, so one of my former mentors, Pete Taccone, who I worked with at Johns Hopkins, always said that sooner or later, people of means will confront the philanthropic question. Now, you could define means however you want to, but sooner or later, someone is thinking about retirement, for example, maybe for the first time, sitting down with a financial advisor to see if they really can afford to do so, or they're doing their first will, or they're, and all these things, I believe, cause people to reflect upon what in their lifetime has helped shape who they are, and to what organization can they attribute part of their success. And I believe very strongly that's when most people think, those college years or my church or whatever has really shaped who I am. And even people who have big families, sometimes folks are like, I've done all I needed to do for my children. I educated them. I helped them buy their first house. I'm helping to pay for the grandkids' education. These decisions are now mine, right? And I believe it's out of that sense of gratitude that people just do this. And to your point, you're right. I think every institution, every single year, gets some estate gift from somebody they had no idea,
No, that does happen. And I think what we're seeing in some of our work right now is just uncovering some of those undocumented estate gifts that are truly hidden in plain sight, that historically you literally wouldn't have found out about until somebody passed away.
Right.
If you can find those early, and it sounds like those 3x5 cards you were working with were those same kinds of opportunities. Well, you can meet the people and understand why they've felt compelled to support the institution. But it also probably presents an opportunity, to sort of steward them while they're living, but then potentially maybe craft a bigger gift or a more aspirational, or maybe shaping the gift to better align with their interests, that when they were kind of deciding on their own or with their financial advisor without a liaison at the institution helping guide them, they might not have realized. And so I'm just curious how often you view that sort of estate gift or the uncovering that somebody intends to leave you as sort of the beginning of the conversation versus.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think that, when I think back on my time at Hood, for example, so Hood, for those of you who may not know much about Hood College, was historically a women's college. And when I was there as a professional, men could only attend classes. They couldn't reside on campus. So there was a history of philanthropy, but like talking about dying was considered to be in bad taste when I arrived there, right? And so planned giving is about what are you going to do when you're dead, right? You no longer need these funds. And it's really funny because when we created this recognition society, and we had a really robust reunion giving program at that institution, it was just part of its culture. And we started adding into the reunion gift as a subcomponent these planned gift commitments through what was then called our Pergola Society, which is the long story there. But anyhow, it kind of took people aback when we're at this alumni luncheon on a Saturday and we're talking about, this class 50, the reunion has 10 members of our recognition society whose future commitments are approximately insert money here. And people are like, ooh, but it's like getting people comfortable and talking about the fact that, we work really hard all of our lives to accumulate wealth and to accumulate things. And sooner or later, it's got to go somewhere. We can't take it with us. So sometimes just saying, okay, telling stories, marketing, this is the person that left this bequest intention, or this is the person that, made this major, mega commitment. Oftentimes there's a planned gift piece associated with that. And it sends a message to the person back home, maybe I could do something like this. Maybe I can't do that much, but maybe I should do something like this too. And I think I've loved those discussions. I've learned so much from people. And you're right. Sometimes it's like someone tells us that we're in their will for whatever, X amount of money for a scholarship fund. Well, you get to know that person. You get to work with that person. You get to tell stories now about, here's the student from your area who's receiving scholarships now. And all of a sudden the person's like, well, maybe I should do some of this during my lifetime and get this started, right? And then all of a sudden, like you've opened the door to a whole new way of thinking.
Can I ask, in the plan giving context and maybe just development work more broadly, do you ever feel like, is there ever tension with the children, for example? So you meet with somebody and they'd intended to give a $500,000 planned gift, and then you get to know them and they get excited, and all of a sudden they want to give a $2 million planned gift. Are their kids upset with you? I mean, does that dynamic ever emerge in your work?
Yes, absolutely. And so
I feel like this is not discussed.
I will say it's been rare, but that's always one of the questions that I think a good development officer should ask, or a good plan giving officer should ask, is like, who are the other people in your life who should be part of this planning process? Or even, I'll ask very directly, like, do your children know what you're doing with your wealth? Because I think that's really important, especially if people really have significant means, right? And I think more and more I'm working with a couple now, for example, who probably are beyond the point of making their own financial decisions, but the kids are involved. And I've at least met 2 of 3. I talked to the parents about the fact that, it's really kind of a family decision now. But the best planning is really done when the whole family understands what the parents are doing. And, in most of the cases, I've found that, the kids are generally like, look, this is mom and dad's money. They've helped me along the way. In some cases, the kids are making more money than the parents ever did. They're living in a house bigger than the parents ever had. They're driving cars nicer than the parents ever had. I'm talking about the millionaire next door people, right? And so I think there's more of an understanding. But yeah, every once in a while you run into that. And I think it's part of our job to ask those kind of questions.
Yeah, it's interesting. In the I don't know, traditional marketing study, right, MBA class, they would talk about the decision-making unit. Like, you may have a primary contact that is making a decision, but then who are the influencing parties at that company, for example. And I feel like often in development, we think about, maybe there's a primary relationship, and then oftentimes the spouse will be sort of a side-by-side decision maker, but who are those other sort of members of the decision-making unit, like that might be influencing the donor on their ultimate decision, that we as development professionals might not be directly engaging.
Sure. And I think there are times too where, a couple may be approaching this discussion, but one of them is positioned as the lead, maybe talking to the husband. And then by the time as you get through the process, you get down to making decisions, all of a sudden the other spouse is coming in with a different idea or whatever. And you just have to be, I think as development professionals, we're chameleons, right? Our job is to be completely flexible, to be whatever that person needs us to be, and be able to, like, one of my favorite things is, how do we get to yes, right? How do we get to yes here? How do we position ourselves and be creative enough and flexible enough to land the best gift for the institution, but also the best gift for this donor?
I love that. And so it sounds like you then had the opportunity to join that mentor at Johns Hopkins.
Yes, I did. So I mentioned Bruce Bigelow, who was at Hood, who knew Pete Taccone very well. Pete had been at Williams for a long time. Pete went to Hopkins in the midst of a big comprehensive campaign to lead the plan giving operation. I joined him in 1997 and was there through 2006. And I think at Hopkins, at a big institution like at Johns Hopkins, which to some extent is a household name, I really learned a lot about taking discussions as far as we could. That's where my getting to yes was really ingrained in me institutionally. How could we be responsive to this concept or this idea that happens to come with a pretty significant gift associated with it? And can we be flexible in order to get to yes and make something really great happen? And that's where I think as generations were shifting in the major gift realm, right? We were no longer with that sort of GI generation who trusted authority. Like at my hood days, these graduates would say to me, I know it's my reunion year. I know I have to make a big gift. I'm sure the president knows what to do with it. Well, those days are gone, right? So we get to Hopkins, and I'm dealing with donors who are like, they look at any institution standard gift agreement, right, has the escape clause in it. If at some point in the future, the trustees deem that this is no longer whatever, they can use the money, whatever. And I had people shove the gift agreement across the table at me and say, I'm not signing this. Like, this is crap, not doing this, right? So how do you get to yes? How do you work through those things? But yeah, Hopkins was a wonderful experience, wonderful institution, and really learned how to work with, highly decentralized organization, medicine, hospital, engineering, arts program, and really, just learned a ton there. It was a wonderful place to be.
Which led to the opportunity to come full circle in Western Maryland.
Yeah. I went back to my undergraduate alma mater for a period of time. My in-laws were still around. My father-in-law since passed away. I went back to where I, got my start at Frostburg and worked for a regional comprehensive with relatively small campaign goals, relatively immature program, and really is able to move it really kind of to the next place and leave it better than I found it, I believe.
You left in 83, you returned in 07, or maybe around there. How different did the place feel, or did it sort of feel like coming home?
It felt a lot like coming home. And I will say that part of that, interestingly enough, was that, I was on the president's cabinet at that time. And the bulk majority of those cabinet members that I found myself being a colleague with were actually at that institution working as young faculty or young administrators when I was there as a student. So I'm looking at the same faces that I saw from a student perspective. And that was an eye-opener. And
then ultimately, you had the opportunity to go to George Washington. I know you worked with Ann Dean there, who has been a prior guest of Evertrue's as well. So tell me about that experience.
So Ann Dean is a rock star, by the way, for those of you that don't know her. Long story there, which won't have time for. But anyhow, in our profession, we tend to travel in little herds, right? We all know people from previous institutions. There are a number of folks who had been at Johns Hopkins who were now at George Washington, including Mike Morsberger, who was the vice president, John Cudless, who had led the principal gift program, whom I was basically replacing, and had the chance to really focus exclusively on principal gifts, which for GW, like many institutions, was $1 million plus in a metropolitan setting, which was different for me. Again, boy from the mountains, to live in DC was fun. Had a great experience, wonderful team at GW. We were in a comprehensive campaign again, and had the pleasure there of being part of a team that worked on a really transformational gift for the School of Public Health, which came from the Milken organization. Mike Milken and Sumner Redstone was an $80 million commitment to name the building, name the deanship, name the school. Learned a lot through that experience.
What is it like walking into a principal gift portfolio at an institution you don't know, in a city you don't know that well? I mean, I guess you had some time in the general area, but what is day one like? What is onboarding like? What should it be like? I'm curious.
Sure, and I'll say that it was a great experience for me at GW in that onboarding process, because John Cudless, who was leaving the role, we actually overlapped for a period of time, a couple months. And that was incredibly helpful. John, as an individual, kept meticulous, brief, meaningful files, hard files, again, paper. And, we had a team of people around us who, could really pull information from the system. But part of what happened there was that I would just sit down with John for, a couple hours at a time, and we'd run through names, and he would pull out those files, and he had, here are the next action steps that need to happen somewhere in the course of these, next several months, and here's where the president's going to play a role. And we met weekly or every other week, I guess, with the president and his team. And it was really all about how, as a group, we kind of kept things moving. I was introduced in kind of slowly, but very thoughtfully. And, you just kind of go back to asking yourself, what is good basic development work? And it's about, getting in there and trying to develop some sort of relationship that's yours, and keep the ball moving, and knowing when maybe you're not the right mix, you're not going to jive with this person the way John did, or, and really not having an ego about that and just going, man, we're not connecting. I shouldn't be the lead person here. I could be behind the scenes. I could help keep the trains running, but I'm not going to be driving the train.
And in doing that work, I would imagine you're almost never going to be encountering sort of cold leads or brand new prospects, or am I off? Sometimes that might emerge.
No, you're pretty accurate there. I mean, normally at that level, you're dealing with people that have had some sort of relationship with the institution. Every once in a while, there's the rarity, right, where someone kind of shoots out of the dark because the institution has done something that really captures their imagination. But usually at a principal gift level, you're dealing with known entities for sure.
And then following that, you've had the opportunity to, I think, really work through and help lead a pretty transformational period for West Virginia University.
Yep, came here in 2015, and I'll tell you, for those of you that have been in job searches, we've all been in those searches where we have the god-awful search committee of 20 some people, most of whom really don't know that much about fundraising, many of whom want to hear a certain answer coming from the candidate because it advances their kind of their concepts. But I was very impressed when I interviewed here because, and people might find this hard to believe, I really only met with 3 people. I met with Cindy Roth, the CEO, Michael Augustine, our chief financial officer, on the first visit. And then I came back and I had lunch with the then provost, Joyce McConnell, in a building right across from this office. I did not meet anybody on my team. And I had a conference call with 4 board members. And what I liked about that was because I'm a J on the Myers-Briggs. I make decisions quickly. It was made clear to me that the decision about who would get this job rests solely with the CEO, Cindy Roth. And I'm like, okay, that's a good sign for me. That's not, again, some search committee of 20 people having to achieve consensus and kumbaya about whether or not I was the right person. Came on board at a time where the campaign called the State of Mines had already achieved its first goal of $750 million. The board had enhanced the goal to $1 billion, extended the time frame. And it was clear to me as I looked at the information that was made available to me that there are a lot of things that were being done right here at WVU. And probably it's just a matter of taking the development operation to the next level. Where do we pay the most attention? And having come out of a principal gifts background, I'm like, okay, that's where we need to be. And we really did, my first couple of years in particular, kind of reshape, redefine the program. WVU had clearly received gifts at the $1 million plus level in its past, but there was not what I would call a concerted effort and a laser-like focus on growing that part of the pyramid. And that was really one of the first things that I did with a couple key staff here. It's like, okay, if we're going to be successful in this campaign, then the campaign that will undoubtedly follow, that's the first place we have to focus.
And so when you walk into a context like that, you've got some sort of framework. You're coming in, you're like, I'm going to audit the status quo. In doing that quick audit, maybe data, maybe anecdotes, it's clear there's a missed opportunity here. I'm going to make sure everybody else understands that that's clear. And then we're going to come up with a game plan to go and fix it. Just tell me more about those initial observations, either data or anecdotes, that just made it very clear for you that the principal gift opportunity was untapped, and then kind of how you went about building that program.
Sure. And I think, for me, again, coming out of a principal gifts background, we knew every day, like how many principal gifts we closed that fiscal year and who was on next up. And so when I come here, I get the benefit of the fact that there were a number of my senior development professionals who had been here 20 plus years. And, one could look at that and go, oh, that's a warning sign, but it was really a positive thing in that there was a true sense of history and there was a true understanding of the culture of the place. But my first kind of signal about the missed opportunity was I asked some key leaders on my team how many principal gifts were in the campaign already. And nobody could readily tell me that. Like, no one had the answer. And I'm like, okay, that this reaffirms my decision that we need to start here. And when I started asking for, give me some data on this, what I would find, depending upon who I asked, was, if a couple, let's say, had given $1 million gift and they split it, $500,000 to cancer and $500,000 to the School of Arts and Sciences, it wasn't coming on the report as $1 million contribution, right? It's two separate. I'm like, no, let's really define a principal gift as someone or some entity gave $1 million in some way, shape, or form between July 1 and June 30. That's $1 million commitment. I don't care if it came in 4 payments, 3 separate gifts, that's $1 million. So let's define that and let's work from that standpoint. And the other thing that we needed to do from a central operation is for us as leaders to not be hoarding those prospects, right? If we want everybody to buy into this, we need to trust that development officer at the School of Engineering is capable of managing that relationship and securing that gift. And if they aren't, we need to behave in such a way as coaches to help them understand that our job is to help them be successful. We're not saying you're not any good. We're not saying you can't handle this. We're not saying we're going to tightly control the folks at the top of the pyramid. We're saying we're all in this together. All right. And we're all working on this together. So part of the culture shift, I just want to mention too, at the end of my first fiscal year, and we hit our goal, and one of the development officers out in the schools and units called me to congratulate me on having met my goal. I'm like, no, this was our goal. Like, we own this together. And that sense of ownership has been one of the things I'm most proud of in terms of my time here, because again, yes, we're central, the leadership team is central, but together we're making these things happen.
Tell me more about culture and the leadership team, because we have seen countless research studies that talk about lack of tenure, in difficulty of retaining talent in the advancement sector, et cetera, et cetera. Cindy has been leading the organization now, who was a guest on our podcast as well, for almost 10 years. You're rounding the corner on 8 years at WVU Foundation. Chuck Kurzak coming in at about 25 years, if my math serves me. And that is almost unheard of in this sector. So is that just sort of 3 fluke data points, or do you see something around retention that is different there than maybe what you've observed or learned from your peers?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, we do work really hard on culture here, and we are constantly doing, not constantly, but continuing doing like little poly surveys or annual surveys where we're asking people, do they feel aligned with the mission of the institution? Basically, are you proud of the job that you're doing? Do you feel like I make a difference every day? Are your ideas being heard? And we take those answers very seriously. We do have a fair number of long tenured people on the staff here, which is rare. In our profession, it truly is. I think part of it has to do with this institution, with WVU being so important in the state of West Virginia. We are the land grant institution. This state has a lot of challenges that it faces, and really the university in most cases holds most of the answers to addressing those challenges. People feel, I believe, a deep commitment to this institution. And we do try to, I always try as a leader, I always try to ask the people that report to me, Are you getting what you need from me? Are you getting stuff from me you don't need or want? Be honest, create that sort of open. We have a sign outside my door that says clear is kind. Trying to be clear with folks. Despite our best efforts, like everybody else, we hired people during COVID that we've since lost already, who just, I think it was really hard to bring people into a culture when they're getting their laptop and their cell phone in the parking lot of a convenience store. We're trying to balance those things, but I do think paying attention to people's personal lives without being intrusive, asking people how they're doing, how's the family doing, and really, being flexible. We're still talking about, we're not all in the office all the time. We talk about being location agnostic. Your office is where your laptop and your phone is. Work when you can, like get your work done, work when you can. I know in some cases we got folks, and I'm talking to people, I'm sure on this podcast, who have, school age kids and 2 jobs, and, getting onto your computer at 8:30 in the morning may be really difficult. So, we got a whole second shift of people that work late at night who just, I know that's when that works for them. And as leaders, we have to be trusting that people are doing their work and give them the space to do it. And honestly, the people who maybe weren't all that productive when we were in the office all the time are the same people that aren't all that productive when we're not. And
so
vice versa.
you are a believer in remote work, it sounds like.
Oh, I think we just have to be. We think about fundraisers in particular. I don't really want fundraisers working in the office anyhow. I want them out there. And so I don't care. We've hired more people embedded in regions of late, for example. I just want people to work. And if they can be close to an airport, or we're looking at where our people really are, to say we really should just put somebody here. We need to hire somebody to work here, and it also helps for us, like many large complex institutions, to be able to say to our development colleagues in our School of Creative Arts, you've got those 2 prospects in wherever, upstate New York, you'll probably never get there on a regular basis. Let our central people, develop that relationship, build the groundwork, secure the first gift, bring people in. I just think we have to just think very differently about the world of work. I don't think being in the office all the time is ever really going to come back.
I love that. And I do feel like it's quite progressive in the sector from what we're seeing and hearing from our audience, unfortunately. And, looking at, and maybe some of it is just, in circumstances like West Virginia is where you've obviously got a concentration of people sort of, let's call it in the backyard, but it's also highly distributed. I'm just looking at a quick cut. You've got over 6,000 alumni in Florida. You've got 5,000 in New York. You've got over 4,000 in California, 4,000 in Texas. Yeah. And we now have the opportunity to be, far more efficient, finding people in local markets who already know the lay of the land, know how to get around the city. You don't have to be traveling. I mean, I don't know what your flight options are for Morgantown, but it has to be tricky sometimes to get to places in an efficient way. So it seems so obvious to consider regional embedding at a minimum, yet it still feels like it's very much the exception, not the rule, even after COVID.
Well, and we have other people on the team who aren't in development, like IT and researchers who, if a spouse or significant other has an opportunity for a fabulous job, I don't care, Chicago, right? And your choice is either to lose that really good candidate, that worker who's in your IT department or your research department, your communications department, and try to go out and find somebody, or to let them live in Chicago with their spouse. I mean, that's, why would you not say, sure? Why would you not? And I just think that,
let me ask, you've got a lot of peers that are saying no to that. Does this come up? I mean, are you debating this with others, or just staying focused?
No, it does come up every once in a while. Certainly, peers call and say, what are you doing? Or I'm, meeting folks at a conference. I'm saying, we're still on a hybrid work mode here. We're not back in. We've actually reduced our footprint in office space recently, and let some space go. And I think it's very short-sighted to just call people back in the office and assume that it's going to work. I just, and if you got somebody who's not productive outside the office, then you got to deal with that issue. But if for most of your people, being flexible or being remote or being hybrid is working, we had our best fundraising year ever in the height of COVID, and we weren't here. We had our second best year in year 2 of COVID. And there are a few people here, but most of us weren't. So I think most organizations probably proved that it could be done without having people coming in all the time.
Well, reflecting on that experience and on your 30 plus years of experience in this sector, what is required to succeed if it is not cubicles or a physical office footprint? Which, by the way, as a donor, I don't really care where the development professional that I'm working with happens to be sitting on a given day. I truly could care less, but there has been, change is hard. So if it's not about needing the physical proximity, what is it about?
I think it's about a certain skill set and a certain attitude from a development fundraiser standpoint. For example, it's somebody who, and when I interview people, I ask this question, where do you get your energy? What motivates you to get out of bed every day, and what gives you energy during the course of the day? And I think for most frontline development officers, it's about being around people. It's about having relationships, right? And then, having the fire in the belly, every day to get up and say, what of all the stuff on my list in the bazillion emails, I spend my entire day handling email traffic, what are the 3 or 4 things I simply must do to get us closer to securing a gift from that person? And if that becomes your mini Post-it note to-do list, or if that becomes the thing on your computer, or by God, I'm not walking away from this computer or my phone until that's done, then that's what you got to do. And so the funny thing is, I will share with you, now that there are more of us back in the office on a regular basis, it's a lot of the development people who do get their energy from other people. And they're not here all the time, but it's if I went around here today, I would tell you it's my leadership team, it's probably the plan giving group, it's the corporate foundation relations people. They're the ones who are here on a more regular basis. And I think there are a lot of folks who get into development, not a lot. There are a few people get into development thinking it's a certain way, and they'll have a lot of quiet time, and they'll just plan these trips, and they'll go to really nice places. Well, yeah, you do get to do some of that. You also go to some pretty not so nice places, and you work really hard to get in the door and make those appointments. And it's not all glamour. And, and you have to have, I once had a donor tell me very directly, BJ, you're in a lifestyle job. You've chosen a lifestyle profession because yes, you're at every home football game on a Saturday, and yes, you're at every banquet on a Friday night. And yes, and no, you're not going in later in the day the next day because you worked late the night before because you have so much work to do. It's you are making a lifestyle decision. And if being around people 24/7 is not what you want to do not go into a fundraising job.
BJ, what is the least glamorous development experience or trip that you've ever had?
Oh, goodness. There's so many, actually. Staying in a really
It'd be a whole new podcast, by the way.
Yes.
My worst trip ever, the Development Officers Podcast.
People would call in upstate New York years ago. With the two, I had 2 visits, traveling with a colleague, staying at a really bad hotel, and I ended up, I don't know why I did this, but I closed the bathroom door when I was in the bathroom, and the bathroom door stuck and it wouldn't open. And thank God I was traveling with somebody, because eventually they were out in the car, and the bathroom was on the back of this strip hotel, so nobody was back there. I'm shaking the door and I'm yelling. Long story short, the hotel staff comes in with a butter knife, and they get the bathroom door unjammed, and they said, as they got me out of there, this happens all the time in this room.
You didn't see that on the Google reviews before you booked it?
No,
This
no.
I'm going to now ask that question to every single guest because that is poignant, and I'm
Yeah.
glad to have butter knife on hand.
Yeah. Actually, at a staff meeting about 2 weeks afterwards, one of the staff person came in. They said, I opened this Federal Express package erroneously, BJ. And I'm sorry. And I opened it, and my colleagues had made the letterhead for this hotel, and they had wrapped in wrapping paper a butter knife for me. And I really kind of almost went through the roof. They totally caught me off guard. I thought it was legit that the hotel had sent me a butter knife as an apology for this situation. So anyhow, the butter knife. Yeah, that's it, probably.
That is instant classic Ray's podcast material. Thank you for sharing the butter knife.
Sure.
Let's shift to maybe a more meaningful story, and then we'll wrap up. Tell me about Harriet and Milton, maybe more on the more fulfilling side of the history.
Yeah. So this is a great couple that I had an opportunity to work with at Johns Hopkins. And this is really kind of the millionaire next door story, which I know there are a lot of younger people than me in development that may not even know about the book, The Millionaire Next Door, but it's all about, the hidden wealth in this country. So Harriet and Milton had been married a really long time, very much in love with each other, never had children. And they were very enamored with the Children's Hospital at Johns Hopkins and wanted to do something to support children. And I think one is I loved them very much, and they felt like family to me. My wife had made the comment once that, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Anyhow, I won't tell that part of the story. It's too emotional. But anyhow, so they really just started making these charitable gift annuities. They started to fund one and then two, and they loved how it worked. And they ended up just really achieving a certain gift level before they die as being like a really primary goal for them. And long story short, over a period of years, Milton passed away first. I stayed in touch with them after I left the institution, actually, and Harriet ended up naming a garden at the new Children's Hospital in honor of Milton, her husband. But they're just really cool people. And Harriet, well into her 90s, I'm a project person in my personal life. I know many people, just constantly have projects. She's calling me. She's like 94. And she's like, I'm thinking about replacing all the windows in the house, BJ. What do you think? So I really kind of became like this sounding board for her, kind of like a son. And it was my wife, like the emotional part. She said, my mother will always be around as long as Harriet was around, because she really became my kind of a mother figure after my mom had passed away. But they were just the sort of people that were so unassuming that could have easily gotten lost in the shuffle and the noise of a large institution in a massive campaign, who just had hearts of gold. And all they wanted to do was make the world better for somebody else.
BJ, how often, it's a beautiful story, and appreciate the emotion, and shouldn't shy away from that's sort of what makes this sector amazing. But how often do you feel like those kinds of relationships do fall through the cracks? And honestly, I feel like, as part of our work and others in the field, that's what I feel like our charter has to be, which is how do we make it almost impossible for relationships like that to fall through the cracks, because the opportunity cost is literally not being able to change the world in as holistic of a way. And so it's such a powerful anecdote that I'm sure you've shared with others, and hopefully you can reinforce as being just an example of why we're doing what we're doing. But also, if we had just done things a little bit different, they could have completely fallen through the cracks. It would have changed their life, their lives, their ability to achieve what they wanted to achieve. It would have limited what the institutional impact and investment could be. And so how do you kind of reconcile that?
Yeah, I think that's I think it's something we really need to pay attention to. And there are things that we do sometimes institutionally from a data standpoint that as transitions happen, bad things can happen if someone's not around to think about it. For example, and I've run into this previously where you have a couple, right? So regardless, husband, wife, situation where the giving gets associated with a primary record with, let's say, the husband. So the giving is there. She only has like maybe recognition data, or maybe it's all on his record. He passes away. The development officer changes. All of a sudden, she's not getting invited to this thing that you always do because we're pulling the data from a certain way, that we've always pulled it that way. And, it's like we have to be super careful in how we manage our data so that sort of stuff doesn't happen. To be thoughtful about, is every part of this relationship, this couple, whatever it is the money following on both their records? Can we make certain that someone won't get dropped when someone passes away? And how, especially in our profession where probably the average development officer is on the job 18 months to maybe 2 years, I've certainly been, and I've moved around myself, but I've been in places long enough to be the person who's seeing this donor who says, you're the 4th development professional I've seen, in a 12-year period. Like, should I bother investing in you? Like, are you going to stay? And try to remember that the relationship is always, of course, with the institution, but we as development officers have got to be really thoughtful. Like I said with my John Cutlass example at GW, he sat down with me and said, these are the people, we can't drop the ball on this group of people, right? And, I think with all of our new technologies and everything, I think sometimes we can over rely on the IT side of the operation to guide us when fundamentally we just need to remember there are people behind these relationships. And if, someone leaves your team and you're not reassigning in a thoughtful manner all the folks they were working with, we're losing out there.
Yeah, that's where I feel like there is an element of, mystery shopping through the lens of the donor, right? We do all of these things. We'll talk about a gift processing rule, or we'll talk about a CRM conversion, and all of this stuff happens. And then at some point, somebody's got to come back and say, okay, what about Harriet? What about Milton? Let's just look at what their experience has been for the last 12 months. Right. We might have done all of this investment and all of these rules and all of these smart automation things, but Harriet and Milton just went a year without hearing, or Milton got a bunch of contact, and we basically created a new rule that meant Harriet got ignored. That's not okay. And I think that's where we've just got to constantly reframe this through the donor experience, through Harriet, through Milton. And fortunately, we do have enough data at our disposal that we can do retroactives, and we can just look and say, what has the actual touch point and experience been? This morning, I had a call with one of your peers that is in Florida today. He said that he's just taken over leadership of a new organization. First thing he does is give me a list of the biggest lifetime donors, and starts going through one by one, trying to deconstruct the history. And he says, it jumps out at him that somebody had given $1.5 million in 2015, had actually hosted a great event for the university since that time, and has not had a single visit. Yeah. Has not had a conversation. And it's just, how do we, again, make that sort of thing almost impossible? Got a long way to go.
I think we do. And we have to recognize that we are all functioning in a highly competitive philanthropic market. And, people don't need to give their money to us, whoever the us is, be it your alma mater, your church, or your charity down the street. They're under no obligation to do this. And, I think sometimes we just get we start making assumptions that so-and-so is always with us, they'll be with us all the time. And, if we're not there, if they don't perceive us as being there at those critical life moments where they're making big decisions because they have to, then shame on us.
Well said. Good concluding thoughts. PJ, thank you so much for sharing. Tell me about the latest at the foundation. Are you hiring? If folks want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to connect?
We do have positions opened, and our website, WVUF.org. You'll see some things there. I'm also happy to hear from people directly. I'm sure my contact information's in there. We are, like many institutions, in the quiet phase of a comprehensive campaign, which we'll be launching here at some point. Haven't quite decided when, but we have just a lot of great things happening at this institution. Again, for I've always been mostly in higher education, and I think that land grant institutions in particular, who really have at their core mission service for the people of their state, it's a really motivating thing to do. We have a great culture here. So I just hope everybody who's maybe participating, that they're all in a place that makes them happy every day to get up and go to work. Whether you're going to your computer in your study or to the office, I think it's really important that we find a lot of gratification in how we spend most of our time. And if you're not doing that, you need to look at why that is and change that situation for yourself.
Well said, BJ. And I'm hopeful that our paths will cross maybe at the Big 12 Development Conference or the Case Summit or sometime here in the next few months.
Sure.
Today, I sincerely appreciate your willingness to kind of share your story and share your history. And so with that, I'm going to close today's episode. I'd encourage you to reach out to BJ on LinkedIn or be in touch. With that, Brent signing off with today's guest, BJ Davisson from the West Virginia University Foundation. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks. Take care.